everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Sustainability in Action webinar. So I'm really excited to be able to present this event to you before. If you haven't got involved in any of the Transition Partners events before, we are a tech business change, transformation and digital recruitment agency based in Leeds. We've got an office over in Berlin as well. We love to get really sort of stuck into the community by leaving a really positive footprint on the tech ecosystem. So that's getting involved in a number of events around things like neurodiversity, women in tech, diversity and inclusion. We host, you name it, there's a topic about it, we'll get involved in it at Transition Partners. And something I got really interested in back end of last year is sustainability in tech. So we hosted our first webinar, was that last summer, wasn't it, Rich? Probably last summer. Yeah, and touched on the subject, and we wanted to delve a little bit deeper today. So I'm really glad to be able to have be welcoming a number of guests and our fantastic speakers. So just so everyone is aware, there will be a chance for a Q&A later in the event. So feel free to pop any questions you've got over in the chat or the Q&A section for us, just so we can keep tabs on that, and we'll keep coming back to your questions. But we are recording the session. It does go live on our YouTube channel, so if anyone's missed it, feel free to share it. And also following the event today, we'll also send you feedback forms, so if you could please fill them out with any feedback or any future topics of events, or if you'd be interested in getting involved in the future, that'd be fantastic. So yeah, thank you so much for taking your lunchtime to spend with us. I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic event, and without further ado, I'll introduce you to both my speakers. So I've got the fantastic Rich Kenny, who is the IT director at TechBuyer. And we have Nathan Boniso on, who has actually kindly stepped in for Lubomila, who's unfortunately had a bit of a family emergency, but he is also the co-founder at Plan A and chief marketing officer with the business. So we've got a wealth of experience and knowledge here around sustainability today. So I'll let the guys introduce themselves properly. Rich, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, my name is Rich Kenny. I'm the IT director at TechBuyer. We're a sustainable ICT business, so we specialise in circularity in server storage and networking. I'm also the director of strategy at Interact, which is a machine learning software as a service application that aims to reduce carbon centre data footprint and CO2. That's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for getting involved, particularly after last time. You did a sterling job of the last event, so really excited for today. And Nathan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Nathan Boniso. I'm co-founder of Plan A and CMO of Plan A, which is the company that provides software as a service for businesses and other organizations to calculate, monitor, and reduce their carbon emissions. We're based in Berlin, so we've been active since 4 years now. Really excited to double down on the tech, green tech, and the IT sector's role in sustainability. So really happy to see all of you here, and really happy to answer any question that comes our way.
So exciting! Great to have you on. Let's start then with Nathan. With you, what does sustainability mean to you?
All right, we're starting in the heart of the target.
Yeah.
What sustainability means to me. We've actually done quite a bit of semantic research on the term, trying to understand where it came from. Right at the beginning of Plan A, actually, we wrote an entire piece on the origin of the concept, discovering, by the way, that it dated since basically prehistorical times. And taking that and modernizing a little bit is, for me, really the idea that whatever we're doing and whatever we're building as individuals, but also as organizations or groups of humans, we're doing it in a way that will be as long-lasting as possible. I would have said forever lasting. However, this is not exactly something that I believe in, but as long-lasting as possible. And in a way that allows the entire system to be as long-lasting as possible. So there is really an element of time in this concept, but there is also a very important element of existing in a surrounding ecosystem, maybe, but in a surrounding system for sure, that allows everything to function properly.
Fantastic, that's awesome. I've also just posted a quick poll to see if anyone's how familiar people are with sustainability. So also if you can write in the comments of your experience of where you're at on that journey. It's certainly a journey for me. I'm learning every day, and luckily I've got the help of Rich Kenny to help me out. So why don't you tell us, and Rich, what sustainability means to you?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, the ability to meet present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. I like that definition. I think when we talk about sustainability, most people think we're talking just climate change, things like that. But I think you need to be aware that we're looking at hunger, poverty, gender and income equality, education. Fundamentally, the ability to make a better society going forward for everyone that is a stakeholder in society. So sustainability is about identifying initiatives that allow us all to consume at the rate we want to, while allowing others to make the same decisions in the future. That's sustainability for me.
Yeah, I think it's about doing the right thing as well. And I think there's definitely a lot of things that you've taught me around sustainability, a lot of facts and knowledge that you've shared with me about sometimes how you think you're doing the right thing by thinking you're being more sustainable, but actually there's a lot of compromise that comes with that. So it'll be interesting to kind of discuss that a little bit further as we go on with this session. So we're going to start then by talking about from a business and from a commercial perspective, and then we're going to go more individual and from technology. But I think it would be really great, Nathan, if you can start, perhaps, obviously you've got so many affiliations with organizations all across the world, that you'd be able to kind of discuss what the main reasons that businesses are starting to look at sustainability.
Sure. This is a really interesting topic, I believe, because of its variety of answers, actually. So to give everybody a little bit of context, Plan A works with companies mainly across Europe, but also across the world through partners. And we work also with a lot of non-governmental organizations that also provide services such as offsetting, such as activity, plastic removing, and other providers. So we discuss about sustainability and the needs to do sustainability with a really large panel of companies, from football clubs, Werder Bremen, to engineering companies, all the way to tech companies, of course, as well. So that's the point of view, that's the place I'm coming from with this. And we've outlined three kind of main families of reason. One of them is really commercial value. So we felt a shift. We've been existing for 4 years, and right around 2019, there was a clear, we saw a shift in understanding from companies that clean business is kind of good business from a customer perspective. They are losing customers now because of this selling point. So really retaining and attracting a new generation of customers. The generational question is very much at play here. So really this first commercial point. The second big chunk is the regulatory frameworks. So this is it's quite an interesting topic to discuss also during COVID, because a lot of companies have put it on the back burner, so to speak, or we're like, okay, we can only do it later because now we're focusing on these other topics. But in the same time, the legislation that's been already decided some years before is kicking in this year, next year, and in the upcoming year. And great example for this is financial bodies acting in the EU. So it's pretty groundbreaking, because every single financial institution that sells at least one financial product, every financial institution in Europe, has to report on the entirety of its portfolio and its assets. That's the regulation that's coming in place. It's not yet in place, but this has basically created a big race towards these companies needing to address this problem, and they don't really know how to address this problem in the best way. So this is a very large kind of also reason for action. And then the final category that we've bucketed is this yearning or this aim for really market leadership. So there's a lot still to be done in the space of sustainability for businesses, and more precisely within industries. So we are still, again, taking the financial institution example. that I've been working with this morning. We are still they are still determining how to do the measurements properly, how to have international guidelines to do greenhouse emissions calculation for financial institutions. So we're still at this fairly ground level, and we're still trying to really determine what are the best practices. And I believe that companies have really identified this as a place to become the leaders for this. Another example that springs to mind that I just mentioned is this football team, Werder Bremen, which is a fairly famous team here in Germany, but not the most famous, not the biggest one. However, doing sustainability, to which a thing that they're super committed to, allows them to have a global reach, allows them to have a local reach, allows them to become a football club that people talk about in Germany, but also beyond. And that brings them, of course, as a public-facing institution, a lot of returns and a lot of interest. So there's more, but these are three really big strands that we're really working with here at Planning.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think when me and Rich actually were speaking about this last week, and from a business perspective, we've all noticed like it's all been heightened, the interest in sustainability. For example, even when we place tenders now as a third party, procurement want to know about our plans around sustainability and what we're doing as a business. So it certainly seems to be becoming more common knowledge and more prevalent within the market. I'd love to know then, you mentioned slightly on that around the metrics then. So like what metrics are currently being used and what should we be looking at from a business perspective around sustainability?
Again, this is it's really great to talk about this because you see the difference between what clients are interested in and what metrics are key, and there's often maybe some dancing around this. It depends on which standpoint you put yourself in. Let's take the example of a company that is truly dedicated to sustainability. And that are really going for non-greenwashing. Just for the sake of example, let's keep this edge case on the side. These companies, according to what their priorities are with sustainability, will look at a combination of commercial numbers. So is this actually working out for me as a company? Is this useful in a very dry, maybe cynical almost sense? And that would be often coming from management, who have different kind of stakeholders to manage, and then you have also the rest of the KPIs, which are really important and which are the ones that we work with a lot, which are the planetary KPIs, we'll call them, or the metrics, which is the amount of CO2 equivalent that is being analyzed. And I'm sure Rich can tell us a lot more about what different scopes of emissions are. One of the key questions in emission calculation, measurements, and accounting is how do you cover the entirety of your emissions, or are you just focusing on a little bit of it? And this is a metric that we look at very closely, that some companies maybe don't have the awareness to look at closely, but we try to push them in this direction. So what is the volume and the proportion of emissions that you're actually measuring and then reducing and or compensating? And then what also is very important to almost everyone, and maybe a bit harder to measure, but it's a metric nonetheless, is the level of engagement of the team internally. A lot of company planning and others work on this engagement. We have, for example, in our action plan, in the reduction chapter of our activities, we propose action cards. And we have, as a short indicator, the amount of CO2, the actual impact in reduction in CO2, the engagement that it will bring to your employees. Is this going to make your employees engage with the topic, learn more, and the ease of implementation? So how many people is it going to take and how long is it going to take to implement this change, which is also a very big factor. So again, it's a slightly partial answer because it really depends on which standpoint.
So many different aspects.
Yeah, but we essentially, if I can just add something, it's really a story also about making salient a new set of KPIs, a new set of indicators. And a lot of companies are actually really interested in getting this business intelligence, this environmental and business intelligence, in order to make better and more informed decisions. So they're really curious as to which metric can using sustainability bring them.
Perfect. And I know Rich will have plenty of value to add to this then. Rich, do you want to add to the point that we've discussed around metrics?
Yeah, I don't want to say much about it because I think Nathan's covered it beautifully. What I would say is like we look primarily at my area of expertise around scope 2 and scope 3, so I don't focus too much on scope 1 when it comes to the CO2 emissions. So we look at scope 2, which is the use phase, and scope 3, which is the embodied energy of assets. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that afterwards, I think, when we talk about definable action. But exactly what Nathan said is defining salient KPIs that the business can understand and use. So we find an awful lot of businesses are quite comfortable starting to report on scope 1 and scope 2, but have no idea of their embodied energy costs in regards to their assets. So a lot of them look at how they can use electric fleets or hydrogen fleets. A lot of them look at how they can cut their energy bill, but not a lot of them look at, their purchasing, their procurement, how they're buying, who they're buying from, all that sort of stuff, because those all have definable impacts as well. So certainly my experience is very similar to Nathan's, but I thought he covered it really well. But the key thing is identifying salient metrics. That's your start point, and then work from there, because you're not going to hit them all.
So I think there's obviously probably, I'm sure, people that have joined the conversation today that want to be like an ambassador for sustainability within their business. But when you're pitching that at a more senior level, it can be quite challenging. But I think a really great way and a great point for us to discuss is like, what ROIs can businesses achieve? Because if you are looking to be that person that wants to stand up and make a difference within an organization, that's how we're going to sell it to the business, right? And be able to make real change. So what do you think, Nathan?
What ROI can businesses derive from carbon accounting and sustainability at large? Well, the ROI really on investment is in terms of return. If we leave on the side, not closing down your business because you're not respecting regulations and paying huge fines or not having access to particular markets, i.e. the EU. If we leave that kind of thing aside and we really look at the positive returns that you can get, well, one is we briefly mentioned is really we're looking, a lot of businesses, especially B2C, customer facing, are looking at a very fast growing generation of people that are really looking at this. It expresses itself in terms of customer decisions, but also in terms of employee decisions. At Plan A, we're, by the way, we're recruiting. Have a look on our website. We've got a lot of new position, and what's been really heartwarming and really uplifting is the fact that every single person that applies to a job at Plan A, it comes from, maybe they're very young and they come from the objective to do something that matters. And this is something that we've observed, like, it's really on the rise. It's nothing new per se, but it's something that has accelerated, we feel, and that's very important for return on investment. One of our OKRs, if you use OKRs at Plan A, is to build the best possible team and have the best possible candidates and the best possible people that have the understanding of these very complex problems. So that's the customer and the kind of employer brand approach. Brand not in the negative sense, but really kind of being true to what you do. And then I really make the point. This is really at the heart of what we do. Is this question of developing new ways to make decisions. What the world is changing, like the costs associated to climate change are rising, and any insurance report will tell you this very, very easily with very good numbers. And so if the businesses don't really adapt to this, then they're going to have a lot of trouble to take into account more variables than simple $ returns, because this is not how you calculate value. This is not the only way to calculate value anymore at all. And this is true from the EU regulations and the directives that are coming out to even BlackRock investments. Say whatever you want about them, and you can totally question or challenge the honesty, or not the honesty, but like at least the objectives behind these letters that Larry Fink is sending. Nonetheless, this is the #1 asset manager, and they are putting it in writing. So much like the URSS, when they recognized the human rights in the 70s, it means something that these people recognize these things. And for me, the return on investment is going to become only more obvious
Yeah.
And more obvious because also the institutions defining value are making it a thing.
Yeah, definitely. So it's certainly time to take action. If anyone's got any more questions around that piece, feel free to add them in the Q&A, and we will come back to that section towards the end of the session. So I think it'd be really interesting then to discuss how can we look at sustainable alternatives within digital transformation. So Rich, I think you're going to kick us off with this one.
Okay, so I'm going to do what I always do, which is go off on a random tangent and hit you with some facts and interesting information.
Give me the facts, because every time Rich Kenny talks about these facts and stats, it like really brings it home to me. So I like
to position stats in a term you can understand, because it's actually a lot of this, the metrics around sustainability are quite tricky to visualize. You know, they're big numbers, they're quite difficult. So I'm going to statize you to within an inch of your lives today. So we're talking digital transformation. I'm going to use a really concrete example. So remote working, because we've all experienced some of that right now. My commute is 30 miles a day at the moment, probably a little bit more, but let's say 30 miles because it's easier to visualize. So I'm removing 30 miles worth of CO2 from every single one of my actions by not driving to work, hypothetically. I'm actually in work at the moment, so I'm not doing that today, so apologies. There's actually a plugin you can get from Mozilla where you can put it in your browser and it shows you how many miles you've traveled by consuming data, as in what the CO2 impact has been on your browsing habits for that day. Chrome doesn't have this because it would be twice as bad on Chrome, because Chrome's a pain when it comes to like resource usage. But it's really interesting. So like my browsing yesterday, for example, at home was 2 miles worth of driving. So remote working and digital transformation, despite it underpinning the entire premise of the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, digital transformation is a key driver in making improvements. So, you know, we say remote working and we say, great, it's great. It saves the world 28 miles every day on me driving, even if I browse like an idiot. And visualizing that's quite hard, because you think, well, how can you equate data to driving a car? Like, how does that sit in your mind? Like, do you have a concept of what data is? And digital transformation is about finding better uses of data. That's fundamentally what digital transformation is about. If you're talking about implementing systems, if you're talking about, you know, adding in remote working, if you're talking about analytics, you're talking about automation, all these digital transformation things, it's fundamentally underpinned by data. So I'm going to give you a really nice example of how data works in a way that I think will be interesting for you. So I'm going to have to read some of this off for you, because a lot of the stats I want to be very accurate on, because someone very much told me off about one of my stats on this and I had a big argument about it and it was unnecessary. So there was a kind of transformational song came out last year that was, you know, just incredible, and it was about taquitos and burritos. It was called Despacito, and it was the most streamed song of all time. It was streamed 7 billion times in 2019. That's how many times it was streamed and watched. 7 billion. So
we've got quite a few Justin Bieber fans at Transition Partners, actually.
This is going to horrify you, just how much Bieber has hurt the environment last year. So Despacito, it's 4.42 minutes long. If you stream it in a browser, it's about 87 megs worth of data to stream it in a browser. So 7 billion views, 87 meg per view, fundamentally. What does that look like? So that's around 609 petabytes of data. And it's about 500 million hours of video consumed to watch something about, I think it's about burritos, right? Am I right in the song? It's reggaeton, it's good, I like it, but fundamentally I don't speak Spanish and I'm not entirely sure it's right, but I'm under the impression it's something about taquitos and burritos, and it's good. I like it, right? So to increase it, I didn't want to stream it as well, by the way, because I didn't want to listen to it, because I didn't want to contribute to this. So I don't want to cause a problem by actually knowing what I'm talking about in regards to the actual song. But anyway, that's the song. So 500 million hours of video is watching this. Now I'm going to give you context. So a petabyte is 1,024 terabytes, which is 1,024 gigabytes. So 1 petabyte, is the equivalent of about 250,000 DVDs worth of data. So if you physically stacked up those DVDs, you could get 250,000 DVDs worth of data into 1 petabyte. Streaming Despacito last year was 609 petabytes. So 250,000 DVDs worth of data, 609 times that. Okay, that's a lot of DVDs, right? Like if that's DVDs, that's about as many DVDs as it would take to be the height of the Eiffel Tower, is the physical storage device data to stream Despacito last year. You go, okay, right, that's kind of something I understand. That's the height of a very big building, listening to Justin Bieber. But what's interesting is how data transference actually works. So I'm going to still use the same example. So you have kind of 3 phases of how data is used. So stage 1 is the data center. So you watch it on YouTube. That lives in Google's data center. Google are incredible from a sustainable point of view in regards to how good they are at limiting the cost of data on premise on their site. So what we would class as compute and storage energy, which is basically the data center, so the physical access of Despacito, is 8.2 gigawatts. So that's a lot. It's a lot of data, but you know that number means nothing to any of you. You then get the second part, which is the network transference, and this bit's awesome because this is going to lead into how you can make physical changes through digitalization in each of these sections. So stage one is compute and processing, and that's 8.2 gigawatts. The next stage is network. So this is getting it from data center to you. Okay. Now the medium with which you do that determines how energy intensive it is. So Wi-Fi is the best, and then it significantly degrades as you move through 3G, 4G, 5G. 5G being better, 4G being pretty good, 3G being awful. The region you consume it in also has an impact. So if you use 3G through a content delivery network from Google in India, it's 20 times more energy intensive to stream that video than it is for me to do it in Wi-Fi from my front room. So we're consuming the same piece of data, the same 87 megabytes of Despacito. And if I stream it at home on Wi-Fi, it's 87 meg, hypothetically. The guy in India who's consuming it on his mobile phone through a 3G tower uses 22 times that amount of data to watch the same video in the same content. So like the regional aspects of how you're consuming data determines how effectively you consume it. So the distribution network piece, which is the streaming done through content delivery networks, through 3G, that's 877 gigawatts. So creating and storing the content was 8. Getting it to you was 100 times that, depending on what your preference was to use it. So that's a lot. So we're now at like 895 gigawatts, 885 gigawatts. The final piece then is the energy for your device. So the phone is the most efficient way to consume data. It uses about 1 watt. The next one is your laptop at 60, and then you hit a TV.
Oh, really? You'd always think it was the other way around. Like, I'd always just assume that my laptop was a better form. Yeah.
So a laptop is 60 times worse to consuming this type of media than your phone.
Okay.
Fascinating, right? Phones are incredibly energy efficient. They're monsters. So the reason this is important, right? So what I'm telling you now is that it determines the video you're watching, the asset, is now determined environmentally, not just by where you're getting it from. So in this case, I'm getting it from the most efficient data center on the planet. But if it was a less efficient data center, it could be 3 or 4 times worse just to store it. In terms of how I'm consuming it, in regards to where I am in the world and what networking I'm using, whether it's 4G, 3G, Wi-Fi, whatever, and what I'm watching it on, whether it's a TV, a laptop, or a phone. So all these things play into the consumption pattern, right?
Crazy.
So on a conceptual level, what I'm saying is it's 100 times harder to get it to you than it is to actually make it and store it. What does that mean though? Because basically I've just hit you with 900 gigawatts of data and 607 petabytes. That means that streaming Despacito last year used the annual energy consumption of 4 African countries. I'm not talking small countries. This isn't like Burkina Faso. This is like Sudan. So
wow.
The consumption of 4 countries was used to watch Justin Bieber and a reggaeton mix. And that's one song in 1 year.
It's so crazy, isn't it, when you talk about the impact and it really brings it to life. I think that's
massive, right? Like that's huge. It's more than 250,000 UK homes annual energy consumption was used watching Justin Bieber talk about sandwiches or whatever. Yeah. So massive, right? So this is massive, and I like to give you that example because that's the cost of data. So when I say that I'm sat at home consuming data and it has an energy impact and it has a consumption piece, that's what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about those 2 miles I've saved driving is the transmission and receiving bit. So you can see that not driving though is much better, right? It's 15 times better for me to sit at home and consume data. But the way I consume data can be 10 or 20 times worse depending on how I choose to use it. And that's the bit that you can directly impact and businesses can impact. So if you address that every stage down the line, so make the data center as efficient as possible, make the content transfer network as efficient as possible, and then watch it in the most efficient manner, you could reduce that consumption by 10-fold. And it wouldn't change your enjoyment of that medium.
I think it's really interesting how you kind of like the piece that we talk about as well is like looking at the alternatives, and particularly I guess bringing it back to digital transformation. And that piece is that, like you say, you can look into different, and sometimes the one that you think would be the obvious greener choice quite often isn't, which I find
right. And this is why I'm saying, so those pieces of information there, to be clear, that information is really hard to get. My friend Ravi Basharoof did it. He's a remarkably smart gentleman, and like he was on Dispatches talking about this not that long ago.
Oh wow, yeah.
And I went
someone's actually just asked where you got that source from about this.
That information is from the Uptime Institute, and I mean, I'm giving you the Cliff Notes version. I'm giving you the condensed version. I can actually show you the energy calculations, how this works, the assumptions, the whole lot. It's a good research paper, I'll be honest. And you know, the guy that wrote it is very smart. He's the smartest guy in the world when it comes to this stuff. But yeah, interesting. So that's data. So that's one piece we can address, right? So you know how I said it when Nathan and I were talking earlier on, we were saying scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. Scope 2, that's scope 2 data, the consumption piece. That's use-based data. That's the use of energy. Now businesses can make these decisions day in, day out, just like humans can, but without knowing what they're consuming, it's a problem, right? So that's the use case. So that's digital transformation. So driving worse than data can be 10 times better and not change how you enjoy consuming that data. So that's my key takeaway really on digital transformation piece. I think that's important. So I think that's an important one. So Ellie used one of my stats on data use as part of this. So we talked about practical tips, because I want to give you some of the practical, right? I want to give you something so you can do something, have an impact immediately, right? So practical tip number 1, use Wi-Fi, not mobile data. So basically what we talked about there, Wi-Fi, if we class Wi-Fi as 1 unit, in the UK, using Wi-Fi is 3 times more efficient for energy consumption than using 4G and 3G data. Mm-hmm. If you're working with an outsourced operation and you've got call centers or development teams or whatever, India and Asia are 22 times less effective at consuming mobile data than the UK. So if you've got an operation that's over there and they're using mobile data for anything, the impact is probably 8 times greater than if they were using Wi-Fi. So make sure that your networks are set up correctly in your businesses, and that's the same for you. Like if you're thinking about if you're going to want to watch a movie or something, don't watch on mobile data. And I'm sure some people do and don't, but get the Wi-Fi there. That's number 1. So number 2, and this is the stat that Ellie used of mine, which is Teams calls with video use 94% more energy and produce. Yeah, see, this is why we have to do this. Use 94% more energy and 94% more carbon than just audio only. So audio only for an hour on Teams is 36 meg consumption. High definition, which is the default on Teams, is 540 meg per person, that video call. So that's 1 hour of video is 540 meg per person. And I said I'd give you something that lets you understand what that looks like. So those 2 people having a Teams call with video is 1 gigabyte of data, 1 gigabyte. That's the equivalent of 50,000 trees shredded, chopped down into paper, and printed on the paper that those trees would produce. That's the volume of data that can be held by 1 gigabyte. If you turned 50,000 trees into paper and stored data, physical, like stored words or calculations or pictures, whatever, on that paper, that's the equivalent of 1 gigabyte. That's what 1 gigabyte of data can store. It can store that. Now, it's not going to save you 50,000 trees, let's be clear. I'm just saying, if you can visualize how much paper you can make from a tree, times it by 50,000, that's how much you can store in 1 gigabyte, which is the same as a 1 hour Teams call.
It's just important to get the scale of it, isn't it? That's the thing, the scale of it. And if you think people back to back on things,
right? That's big. That helps me think about it. Like when I'm thinking about my day, and I go, I can reduce that by 94%. So
even just simple, I think the good thing there, you've given us a couple of tips, but from a simple business perspective, if we want to be more sustainable, we could literally say, everyone, as soon as you come into the office, you need to switch on Wi-Fi, don't use 3G, 4G. And from a commercial perspective, we're going to, anytime it's an internal meeting, videos off and just use audio, for example. Just like little tips that we can do to make a more positive step towards being more sustainable.
Because we've become comfortable during Corona with saying, Teams here. And what would have been a phone call is now a Teams call. A phone call would have been just as productive. Now, when you need video, use video. Like, go for it. Like, you want to do a big Teams call with 50 people, wicked. But how many meetings have you sat on recently where you sat in a meeting on Teams, one of 10 people, and contributed one thing to that meeting, but you've all sat there on video? That's consumed 5 gigs worth of data. So 250,000 trees worth of data.
One question that I have, maybe, Rich, because it makes me, we work a lot in terms of communication on how to solve the scales, the difference between what an individual can do and the difference of the peta to the power of 12 or 15 difference of the problem. So in your opinion, and the question is voluntarily provocative, is tech and the development, the fast development of tech, I'm thinking 5G, is it more an ally to sustainability or more of a problem? Because we are replacing these trees with energy, which potentially could be sustainable. What's your, how do you approach, where does tech live?
So that's it. So every single one of the Sustainable Development Goals outlined by the UN, at its heart, has digital transformation baked into it, whether it's the reporting, the analysis, the comparisons, whatever. Digital transformation is critical. The main part is how we approach it. And this is, we're going to talk about this a minute, aren't we? We're going to talk about end-to-end approaches to sustainability. So your question's a great one, Nathan, because it sounds like I'm saying, whoa, don't watch Despacito. Like, actually, if you're going to watch it, there's a way you can make it 12 times more efficient without limiting your enjoyment of it in any way at all. Switch on your Wi-Fi, watch on your phone. Wicked. Or don't watch on your phone and stream it through Spotify. And then you remove the video aspect of it. Like, you can reduce the consumption, impact of what you're doing massively. And if you think about this as a business, so as a business point of view, if you're doing research, if you watch a video on YouTube in high definition, it uses three times more energy than watching it in standard definition. But nearly every single one of your monitors at work can't consume correctly in HD through YouTube. So there will be no visible, discernible difference in you consuming SD versus HD. So you'll see the same thing. It'll be 3 times worse for the environment.
So crazy, isn't it? I'm conscious, obviously, time-wise, that we want to make sure we've got, I think, 5 questions sitting there already. So
yeah, cool.
We want to make sure we get around to that. But I think, we were going to touch on positive changes, like what we can do to make that rich. So if you want to finish off with that before we go into the QA, and then obviously we can see if Nathan's got anything.
Yeah, I guess the positive changes is find areas where you're doing something regularly and find a better way of doing it. Because I don't want people to change their consumption. I want people to change what they want to do. I want them to do it better.
Yeah.
That's what sustainability means. We're talking about people being allowed to do what they want to do so that other people could do it later. So this sort of stuff I'm talking about, teams, HD definition, choosing your device, none of these impact your enjoyment of the mediums. They just change the way it works. I'm going to say this is really stupid, but when you sit and you've got a 2-year-old like I do, and you leave Paw Patrol on all day on your big TV, from Netflix, and he's watching it for about 15 minutes, for the rest of the day it's just on in the background annoying you. Stop doing that. I'm streaming something in SD, just to be clear, I'm streaming HD, always SD. But I'm unnecessarily streaming something that doesn't need to happen. I'm leaving a TV that uses 100 watts worth of energy an hour on, in case he wants to dip in and dip out. Maybe we should structure our time a little bit differently. And it's that across businesses that we can address simply and efficiently. If it's energy monitors, it turns off the lights. My light went off in this office, by the way, when I sat still for more than 5 minutes, because I don't really need it during the day. Yeah. It's annoying when it's 5 o'clock meetings and I go in the dark every so often if you start meeting. Yeah. But then, if I don't put my video on, you'd never know. So, I guess it's addressing stuff like that. And the other piece I'd say is look for reuse as consumers. Look where you can reuse and repurpose as opposed to buy new. So the example of your phone contract, I use an S7 that's 6.5 years old as a phone. It's wicked, it's absolutely fine. I could have done 3 upgrades in that time. That is unnecessary. Just because my contract ends and someone says you can have something new doesn't mean I should have something new. There needs to be a small change in consumer that reuse and refurbish is critically important, and finding ways to make them more performant is a big part of legislation drive that we're on at the moment, to make sure that people don't block updates, don't block firmware changes, so that you can maintain a level of performance you could expect from new. That's the big piece for me, because the one thing I would say is no matter what we do, digital transformation is critical, as is sustainable transformation, but we can't all have it on the ways we're currently doing it. So the one thing I wanted to leave you was the concept of the UK electrified car fleet, and this will be the last thing I'll say, but to electrify the UK car fleet will require 20% more energy than we currently produce. Right? And the only way to do that sustainably is to build wind farms. So to produce the energy, and this is just the energy, scope 2, that we would need to replace the diesel and petrol fuel fleet with electric would require 20% more energy, or 6,000 wind farms to generate that energy. Now that's doable, we can do 6,000 wind farms. The amount of materials required for 6,000 wind farms is the world's supply of copper for the year and 10 times the world's consumption of neodymium for the year. So for us to build the energy for the fleet,
and that's just for the UK,
we would need the world's supply of neodymium for 10 years, plus the world's supply of copper for the entire year. Unrealistic. For the batteries, we need 3/4 of the world's supply of lithium every year going forward to be able to have enough electric vehicle batteries. So electrifying the UK car fleet is not physically possible. There isn't enough raw materials in the world to do that. So when we have these sustainable ideas, we go, yeah, the best we can do is electrify the fleet. Wicked. That sounds great, and that's going to deal with scope 2. What's the embodied use case of scope 3? Well, there's not enough lithium, so we can't have the batteries. There's not enough copper, so we can't have the wind turbines. There's not enough neodymium, so we can't have either. Right, so we can't electrify the fleet. So you set a target of no more petrol cars by 2050.
Yeah.
How are you going to get there when you can't get the raw materials? And what you'll get then is a mining company come in and say, well, we can do it from deep sea mining extraction. We can rip it from the seabed. That'll give us the materials we need. We can take it from asteroids, a la Elon Musk. These are solutions. But, you know, we're talking science fiction in some cases to provide current strategy. And that's the bit I think is a real problem. And, you know, the government don't know this. You know, the stats are there, but they clearly don't know. Otherwise, it wouldn't be saying electrify the UK's car fleet. To be clear, it's a really good objective. But maybe the technology hasn't caught up to allow what we need to happen. So we need an alternative approach.
So it's all about being conscious of the other resources that we're going to take in our actions to try and be more sustainable. But I really like the idea of like just taking like conscious efforts. That's what it's all about to me personally. It's easy to let these little things slip into the back of your mind, but you've got to make conscious efforts to be able to make positive actions moving forward. Nathan, is there anything that you wanted to add to that before we go into the Q&A? So like, what can we do as individuals to make positive changes?
So, I mean, I think Rich reframed it really, really well. This is, again, a question, going back to the very question, what is sustainability? What is sustainability? And yes, having no more explosion engines is a decent sustainable objective. But it's not the only one. If it comes at the cost of the extractive resources, there's a question by our friend Saksha already. How sustainable really are these solutions when they rely on extractive material by people in my lands in India? Totally fair point. And this is the calculations, the engineering calculations that we need to do in order to get to the solution that will actually work. And there's the science fiction scenarios that happen. There's also, I follow this really interesting channel, which is called Low Tech. And it's just people going around the world on a boat, actually, and just implementing very, very low tech solutions for quite complex problems to simplify technology rather than use simplifying technologies rather than use complexifying technologies. All of these are bits of the same puzzle. And we need to make sure, I think, as sustainability professionals, but also governments and also people who are setting the stage need to have this overarching meta vision on what should be done. And it's going to be, it is going to be the product of a calculation, painful calculation, I believe, on what the way to sustainability is going to be. And there's already some decisions that we've effectively made as a species. Biodiversity is not a priority, that we will need to reverse in the very short term if we are to maintain the system. These are decisions that are going to happen or not. One decision is going to be made on a spectrum. And the goal, the name of the game for me is really to move that needle and to influence this playing ground and then get to the individual parts, which requires, and there are possibilities, as Rich, fantastic demonstration, you can reduce by more than 95% your consumption on a given video, on a given day, on a given commute, on a given company activity. And this, if not the ultimate solution, if it's not going to solve everything, at least it's going to make the problem a lot more digestible and approachable for human-sized organizations.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Like thinking about the future impact, and that's awesome. Yeah, I think let's get stuck into these some of these questions then, if that's okay with you guys. So, Cecil, Rich, what would your suggestion be to improve energy usage within offices? Wi-Fi better than cable? What alternatives to laptops or VDI solutions, laptops/tablets, etc.? Share your knowledge and wisdom, Rich. What do you think?
Cable's fine, directly plugged in, so you know, probably even slightly better than Wi-Fi. You know, I'm saying Wi-Fi's, because I'm using an example of phones. A good example would be making sure you've addressed your energy efficiency through your devices. So, you know, one of the projects we work on primarily is with data centers, and it's identifying the least energy efficient servers and refreshing them to more efficient configurations, not necessarily new, but more efficient. And that saves thousands of tons of CO2 for loads of businesses every single day. You can do the same with your laptops. You can do the same with your desktops. So you can identify which are the more energy efficient versions of what you're currently using. And it could be much more cost effective for a business to be looking at its ICT infrastructure on the whole and saying, okay, we've got 100 of these laptops, which one's more efficient and which one therefore would lead to a cost saving? Could we then buy that refurbished? And what you can find is you've got an ROI from a cost point of view, because we always talk about people, profit and planet. So we have to address profit for business. So we find one that's got the most beneficial cost analysis and has the best energy efficiency metrics. And hopefully you can win on both. So you can reduce your CO2, you can reduce your energy expenditure, and at the same time you can save money. That's how I would approach this every single time with IT, because that's what I do. I do IT.
Yeah, Rich is far too kind to say it in black and white, but that's actually what they do at TechBuyer. So if anyone's got any interest in that piece, part of what the business do is about.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time researching this, so like pretty reliable on this. But like you think, yeah, cable it where you can, Wi-Fi where it's available. A really good example we have was to stop guests using mobile data. We set up a segregated Wi-Fi network just for guest users that resets every 24 hours, so there's no security issues. It's segregated from the network. It means users can just come in and immediately access a safe Wi-Fi network. They don't have to have mobile data. It's a small change, but if you've got 60 visitors a day, you're making them 3 times more efficient while they sit there waiting for interviews or talks, and they're inevitably up and down on the phone. Like, you've just made them 3 times more effective in how they're going to consume that data that they would consume anyway. And it was a 2-second initiative to set up. That's a good example. You know, look for those points.
I'd love to add a point to this. Us working with the hardware and software, there's also a big thing to be said about the hardware that you buy. The taking into account all of the scopes of emissions, it turns out that hardware is a huge part of the emissions of IT. The majority, actually, according to the research that I have. I'm speaking under your authority, Rich, in this. But definitely a massive chunk of this emission of IT comes from the fact that you've had to mine the lithium and go get all of the resources, build it, transport it, etc. So one of the easy things that you can do is think about how you make your equipment last longer, and how you can use refurbished phones. I also have it is a smartphone, but it's an old one. So I'm not being perfect. I'm not using myself as an example, but this is the way that you build the sustainability mindset within the company as well. Not approaching it from a consumerist perspective or there's a 2-for-1 deal perspective, but how can I can make benefit on the long term? And this energy example is perfect also.
I think that's fantastic, because you've got to do realistic switches. Like, you can't go back to carrier pigeons, can we? But ultimately, you've got to be able to be conscious and thinking about
what Nathan's saying there is fascinating as well in regards to like the embodied cost. Because when we talk about scope 2, scope 3 is the creation use. So a laptop, to create a laptop, uses 80% of its lifetime energy creating it. So if you use it for 2 years, you never recoup on the energy to actually create it. It takes like 7 years before you recoup on the energy, and it becomes like a neutral acquisition based on the CO2 generated versus CO2 used to mine it. So just for an example, one laptop, creation of a laptop is 300 kilos of CO2 to create a laptop on average. Now that varies between models, but that's where we are. There's 190,000 litres of water needed to create a laptop to mine the critical raw materials that sit in there. That's one adult's consumption for 2 years for one laptop. If you double the lifetime of that laptop, you're saving that much water by not doing a refresh cycle. So these are huge savings on just basic small pieces of ICT, and that's one laptop.
Definitely, that's brilliant. Sag made a good point. I feel really easily sustainable options are in areas of food, buy more local and buy organic. Brilliant. Let's have a little look. Wow, as Rich is making very valuable points which need to be considered, how do you think that companies will believe you? I think if they are occupied with sustainability, they won't think about data or even won't believe it, any plans. And if so, and if Despacito is only one of those massive data users, where do we physically see the CO2, or where do we get our resources?
I disagree with Nathan. This is what the company does, right? Your company identifies exactly where their leakage is, right?
Yeah, definitely. And what we try to bring visibility or give companies visibility and the tooling. That's the idea of having a software that does this. to really let people have the ownership of the data, understand what it means, understand what are the benchmarks, and what our point is to answer the question: do companies believe us? Well, it's truly entirely up to them. We cannot force people to be business partners with us or to sell them our software. But what we can do is make the most informed argument to the business people, but also to the other bottom lines. Again, as I said, it depends which argument resonates with which company. They're different people, different organizations have different needs. But then whether or not they believe us is up to them. And it is our belief, if not we wouldn't be doing this, that the green business, again, is going to be the good business, is already the good business. And for a lot of, maybe if I can start answering also the next question, for a lot of companies that are large, they don't know yet how they're going to do this and how they're going to benefit from it. So it's not really a belief in the individual for or against sense. It's more what are the pros and cons for all of these activities, and is this indeed going to be beneficial for my employees, beneficial for my bottom line as a business, beneficial for the planet, and they truly want to score as high as possible in these three categories, but they do in reality have to make some elements of calls to organize this and to drive even a true proper sustainability strategy. For an enterprise is 10 years, 15 years. It is a long-term thing. So our role is really to, and we can go on the Plan A Academy, where there's a lot of information to make the business case, to encourage the green champion to bring up the subjects to his CEO, for the C-level people to introduce this concept to their board members, etc. We can make that. We can make this case backed by data, backed by science, and they are backed by science and data, and they are also backed by their competitors, which are doing it. So these are the arguments that we have. Then it's up to them to believe in sustainability as a thing for their business.
Yeah, fantastic. Conscious of time, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Just a quick one. Rich, could you tell us more about the app that you mentioned that can track your data usage and shows in terms of mileage saved?
Yeah, this was a quick one. If you just go, it only does it in Mozilla, so it's only in Firefox. If you Google website mileage calculator, there's a little extension add-on that you'll find it. You'll find it.
Yeah, fantastic. Quick one for Nathan. Do you have any concrete examples of banks that are delivering on sustainability with tangible offerings?
Yes. Are we if we're speaking of the UK, there's one actually. Well, so first, hang on to your knickers. It's HSBC was elected the most sustainable bank of 2020. So you don't really want to go in the direction of big enterprise banking. What you do have is the Triodos Bank is the most famous example of sustainable banking. It's like a web app banking that only does sustainable finance. In terms of proper banking for individuals, there are others mainly located in the US. Happy to share after the presentation, after our panel. What I would suggest also is not only get a look at the bank's environmental performance for your own accounts, but also in terms of its investments and what it is actually doing with its money. And this is research actually. There is a lot of non-profit that do reports on this, that try to track and to see what banks are doing. It is still opaque. So it is still quite complicated to know precisely which bank. So Triodos, have a look at these guys, because I know what they do is really quite genuine in terms of their ambitions for sustainability. Another thing that I can recommend, I'm not sure of the UK version of it, but the French version is called Hello Carbo, and this is a little add-on that you put on your banking, basically on your online banking. It does what we call a cost-based analysis. So it looks at how you spend your money, and then it derives benchmark and carbon footprint, much like the mileage. It gives you ideas about what you individually are doing with your money and how much that translates in terms of emissions. And I feel that this is also very valuable as a tool to really bring into perspective what you're doing. Because when you buy a Coke bottle, it understands it and it tells you that in terms of emissions, in terms of water usage, etc., this has a different impact than if you just refill your bottle of water. Just a stupid example.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Hopefully, we've nearly got around to all the questions. There's a couple more. If anyone's got anything they want, we'll send feedback forms to everyone directly following today's webinar. So please do, if you've got any more questions, I can speak to Nathan and Rich and liaise with them directly and get some answers and send it back out to you. So if anyone needs any more info, please do fill out the feedback forms we've sent, or if you're interested in getting involved. What we'd really like to gauge, I know we've had a few people drop out already because people will have to go back to work, but is kind of what extent and what level people want to get more knowledge on sustainability. Are we looking lower level, higher level? What kind of gauge are we looking at? So we can help drive these ideas and these discussions moving forward. I hope everyone's really enjoyed it. I've had an absolute pleasure of an afternoon with Rich once again. And Nathan, thank you so much for stepping in last minute and getting involved in today's event. It's been fantastic having your expertise and knowledge with us today as well. So really appreciate that. If anyone who's attended the event, please do follow Transition Partners on LinkedIn. My name's Ellie Greeny, so search for me on LinkedIn as well, and you'll keep up to date with all of our upcoming forums and events, but also connect with Rich and Nathan as well to keep an eye on all the great things that we've got going on and all the positive events that we've got in the future. But thank you so much for attending today. Really great to be able to spend our lunchtime with you. And thanks to the amazing speakers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Rich, for an amazing conversation. I don't know how I'm happy to find me on LinkedIn or on my email. I'm happy to give that to you, Ellie, and you can transmit it.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, what we can do is we'll connect. I think the idea longer term is that we do want to make a bit of a community around it, but we're just kind of gauging that, aren't we, Rich? I know obviously you're going to be doing more and more work in the UK, aren't you, Nathan, moving forward? So I think Lubomila was keen to make some good contacts over here, but we've just
absolutely. We both love the UK. So if as soon as we can also go back physically, it would be a pleasure for me to come in person. But absolutely, stay in touch. It was really a pleasure to have this panel, to step in. A very interesting conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Anytime, let's have more of these in more places, more often.
Oh, well, hopefully we'll be able to welcome you over to Yorkshire at some point, but if not, I'll be over in Berlin as soon as we can.
Brilliant.
So yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Rich, I'll let you head off as well, and I'll message you both separately anyway. But yeah, thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye, guys. See you later.
Bye.